Have you ever tried to be a good and efficient pioneer and decided to blueprint your builds for later use, only to find out that you couldn't fit the damn machines in the tiny Mk.1 Blueprint Designer box and gave up on the Blueprint Designer altogether? If you've also struggled with this, same as me, you undoubtedly came to the conclusion that the Mk.1 Designer is completely useless due to its size. You are not alone in this thought, but the truth is, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. It is not useless, it's just less useful than you or I would want it to be. Don't believe me? Just ask Ada.
Any complaints about the spatial restrictions will only reveal your own inefficiencies.
There are still ways you can greatly benefit from the Blueprint Designer with these easy stackable designs that I'm going to show you next to speed up your factory building and make your life a lot easier. One design I found really useful is stacking two machines in front of each other with their outputs toward the center, like this. You can place a merger in the center and connect it with belts to two machines placed one on each side of the merger. You will generally not need more than Mk.1 belt for these, but to be sure you can use a Mk.2 belt. I say this now because if we squeeze them to the absolute maximum possible, you will not be able to access the belt to change it later without removing the mergers, and that can be kind of painful. Next you add one splitter in front of each of the inputs connected with belts to the machine, and the blueprint is ready. Again, here you want to use the fastest belt you have available because it's gonna be a little bit tricky to change it afterwards. This blueprint is just for two machines, but you can daisy chain these indefinitely, as long as you have fast enough belt, that is. The number of times you can stack this is purely reliant on what type of item you are making and what belts you have access to. With this configuration, you can always add to the chain later if you decide that you need more production in the future. This works with both constructors and smelters, and I believe it can save you a lot of time if you have scalability in mind when you build your factory. Suspended splitters or mergers. One other very useful blueprint that might actually surprise you when you realize how useful it can be. It's a single floating splitter or merger. This will help you create what I call splitter arches. Splitters can be attached to belts, lifts, or sit on the ground, or on other splitters. However, when you're in a situation like this, the only way to place the splitter in this central location above the belt is to lock the hologram on the ground and nudge it to the correct position. This is less of an issue with the infinite nudging added in 1.1, but this still takes a lot of time. The easiest way to do it is with a blueprint like this one. After you place it, you can then have an attachment point for your belts or lifts, which would have not been possible otherwise. This is a general purpose single item just floating from the ground, but if you decide you really need it, you can build a whole arch like this in the blueprint, rail platform. When I was building my rail network, I have created this super useful blueprint of a suspended double rail. It's not too pretty, but my job as an engineer is to get stuff done, and this does exactly that. Of course you can evolve this once you unlock new components and make it look prettier or maybe add signals to it, but right now I'm focusing on the very early game stuff. You can use this blueprint to design your rail network across the map. Just place it where you want to go and connect the rails afterwards. It's super useful and I wouldn't even dream of designing my network any other way. Sign patterns. Although you generally unlock signs later in the game when you already have the Mk.2 blueprints, you can technically do it earlier. Signs are pretty limited when it comes to configuring them. That's why people create their own sign patterns. Combining different shapes can provide more configuration options. These will rarely exceed the Mk.1 Designer, so sign patterns deserve a spot in this category. You can combine multiple sizes to create a modular sign, or you can simply stack more of the same sign when you want to use signs to illuminate an area, for example. But by far the most useful blueprint I have is this giant sign with a map of my factory. Because I saved it as a blueprint, I can edit it later when I add sections or change configuration of my factory. Honestly, this doesn't serve an actual function, but if you want to create a map for aesthetics, this is the only way to do it. And finally, scalable assemblers and foundries. This assembler setup is similar to the constructor one. This will not actually fit in the Mk.1 Blueprint Designer, in fact it barely fits in the Mk.2 Designer, but to be honest the difference between Mk.1 and Mk.2 is not that significant, so I still consider this an early game build. To make it fit into the Mk.2 Designer, you'll need to have some belts overlapping in the input section. It might not look perfect, but I'm more of a function over form kind of guy anyway. For the input I'll use two lifts pointing in opposite directions, and I will add two parallel belts, one for each lift. When it comes to foundries, the setup is nearly identical to the assemblers. The only difference is that the foundries have an offset output, so the foundries themselves will need to be offsetted a little bit in order to connect to the same merger. So those were my top 5 early game blueprints. It was actually 8, but 5 makes for a better title, so I'm just gonna go with 5. One more benefit for using blueprints that I would like to underline is that when you decide to delete something, you can set the mode to blueprint by pressing R. And if the object was placed as part of a blueprint, you can remove the entire blueprint altogether. That can be a lot faster in certain situations. You can use these blueprints as they are or adapt them to your needs. Or who knows, they might even spark some new ideas. Anyway, that's been it for today. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to come back for more Satisfactory tips.